Everything seems to be going amazingly well in the United States. The crazy years have returned. The economy's growing, employment rates are strong, wages are rising, and taxes are being cut, while government revenues are at a historic high. Yes, everything seems to be sailing smoothly in the United States. Let's take a look at the S&P 500, the most important stock index which covers the 500 largest listed companies in the United States. Well, we've been seeing uninterrupted growth now for 9 years. Therefore, it wouldn't be unreasonable to say that if we looked at this index's graph, it would remind us a lot of one of Elon Musk's rockets. Don't believe me? Well, check out this data. Since 2009, that is less than a decade ago, the S&P 500, when including dividends, has had a return of more than 400%. Just to put some figures on this to give you an idea of quite how much that is, if we'd have invested $10,000 in 2009 in this index, today we'd have $50,000. Certainly not a bad return. In recent years, dear viewers, it has been so easy to make money in the markets that almost anyone can feel like Gordon Gekko himself. But don't jump out of your seat just yet because, well, here's a question. Is everything really so rosy, or does the US economy have a hidden and less glamorous face? Well, listen up.
Americans now owe more credit card debt than ever before in history.
Subprime lending is hot again, but instead of home mortgages, now the loans are being handled out to car buyers.
We've seen subprime auto loans increase by 130%.
The other face.
At VisualPolitik, we usually say that things are never as perfect as they seem. Yes, right now the United States is an absolute economic machine, a high-speed machine. Especially for anyone who has invested, as we saw, in the United States Stock Exchange. However, the great American power, it's got a problem. It's addicted to credit. Yep, you heard that right. Companies, families, governments. Thanks to years and years of low interest rates, almost unlimited credit, and Federal Reserve policies, practically every institution in the country is submerged in debt. You see, after the 2008 crisis, the world's central banks decided to implement a policy that could be simplified as follows. If we issued, that is, create more money, what is popularly known as turning on the money printing machine, and on top of that we set very low interest rates, we will achieve two things. For one, we will get banks to lend more money to families and companies so they can consume and invest more, and any company in trouble will be able to obtain financing and not have to shut down, thus making the economic machine run again. And for another, with all this new money, we can also finance governments so they don't have to make severe spending cuts and so they can continue to consume. Sounds pretty good, right? Well, just wait a minute, because there's a little problem here, and by little we mean huge. See, this recipe, this plan, it's got other consequences, because, of course, we're essentially talking about doping the economy. And when we talk about economic doping, we're basically talking about two things: debt and inflation. And if you don't believe me, well, consider this. In recent years, the United States has been experiencing a golden age. More cars are being sold than ever, the real estate business has taken off again, and all kinds of products are flying off the shelves. And of course, all of those purchases have to be paid for. American families are facing historically high debts, which exceed $13 trillion. That's more than $40,000 per citizen. But, dear viewer, if you think that's all, well, you're quite wrong. If, instead of taking a look at families, we check companies, we find a very, very similar situation. The non-financial companies of the United States accumulated debts of more than $8 trillion. Nowadays, their leverage is higher than it was in 2008, and most of that debt hasn't gone to equipment, factories, or anything like that, but towards buying back shares and paying dividends. And these figures are so crazy high that it's almost hard not to get dizzy. But hold on just a moment, because it's not families and it's not companies that pose the biggest problem. The biggest addiction problem is in Washington. It's with the federal government, and it's with the Trump administration. And here's a question, I want you to answer it in your mind without turning to Google. Do you know how much money the United States government spends per year? Well, listen up.
We are mortgaging our future. We're mortgaging our children's future. We are going to have to pay this money back at some point, and at some point it's going to be impossible.
The government.
At the beginning of the year, specifically in February of the year 2018, the United States Department of the Treasury published its annual report for 2017. This is a report like the one that listed companies present annually, where they state how much they've spent, how much they paid, how much they owe, or what they forecast. Everything is presented in an easy-to-understand document. Indeed, this is actually quite a good habit for the United States government to have. Now, doing the report's all good, but the contents of the report, that's kind of like a horror movie. In 2017, the federal government alone, that is, without counting states and municipalities, spent or made payment commitments worth $4.6 trillion. This means that by itself, the federal government is fighting to be the third largest economy on the planet, which is not bad, right? I mean, it's quite a tally. But as you can imagine, the revenues aren't enough to cover all of these expenses, because the government exceeded them by $1 trillion. That is a truly incredible amount. It's more than Australia's entire economy. To give you an idea, every minute that passes, every single minute, the US government loses more than $2 million. Yes, if the United States government were a company, its shareholders would not be happy. The most surprising thing about all of this information is that the year 2017 in the United States, it wasn't a year of war or crisis or recession or anything like that. It was just a normal year. And when I say normal, I actually mean it was a pretty prosperous year. It was a year of economic growth. But do you know what the result was? Well, the federal government debt now amounts to the astonishing figure that you see on the screen right now. That's $20 trillion. That's more than $60,000 per American and almost triple, more than $170,000 per taxpayer. This means that the United States government real debt exceeds its GDP by 100%. By the way, if you want to take a look at that Treasury Department document, you can find it in the description below. Anyway, all of this debt may explain things like this.
China is reportedly thinking of halting U.S. Treasury purchases, and that's worrying markets. The United States government debt currently in Chinese hands decreases by 10% as compared to its historical highs.
But you know what? President Donald Trump, he's got a plan.
The president's plan.
Lately, it looks like Democrats and Republicans cannot agree on anything. However, there is a way to achieve this. Break the piggy bank and distribute the gains. And that's precisely what happened. In February, Democrats and Republicans achieved the largest bipartisan agreement in a long time. And what was it for? Well, it was to increase public spending.
This agreement delivers on our commitment to fully fund our national defense. No more short-term ploys and patches. Paul Ryan, Speaker of the United States House of Representatives.
With this agreement, the US government will increase public spending by $150 billion each year, essentially just adding more wood to that big old fire. And do you take into account that the Republicans did spend 8 years criticizing Obama for overspending?
The president's put in place as much public debt, almost as much debt held by the public as all prior presidents combined.
When President Obama was elected, the national debt was $10 trillion. Today, it's over $17 trillion.
This thing's not going to solve itself. This is getting worse every day, and we're running out of time.
Look, power really does change everything, so it's not difficult to understand the politicians in Washington. I mean, don't tell me you wouldn't love to spend money that isn't actually yours. But that's actually not all. Do you remember Trump's tax reform, the one that was just approved? We talked about it previously on VisualPolitik. Well, as we saw with that tax reform, the government's revenues are actually going to drop a lot. So the question is, if we lower income and increase expenses, what do we get? Well, yeah, you could probably guess this one. It's a really, really big deficit. So much so that in 2019, the US government's deficit is expected to be between 5 and 6% of the GDP. A huge deficit typical of a country in crisis. I mean, when there's a crisis, we can all understand the government having huge holes in its budget, low unemployment, low collection, etc., etc. But when all goes well, yes, we were told that Trump was coming to set order and put an end to Washington's debauchery. But it looks like he finally decided to join the party, and he decided to do it in style. Well, based on what we've just seen and what many experts are wondering, well, we've got the question of who is going to buy all of this debt. Because, of course, in the next few years, the United States Treasury is going to have to issue trillions and trillions of dollars of debt to pay for this huge mismatch. And in principle, the US's three main lenders, that is, the Federal Reserve, China, and Japan, they're no longer buying. So the result, well, it seems to be this.
We expect rising interest rates and a rising debt level to lead to a meaningful increase in interest expense.
But anyway, dear viewer, that is just the way things are. This is the other, less attractive face of the United States. Now, I really hope that in this video the numbers didn't make it too hard to follow, but we just thought it was really important to tell you the other side, the darker side of the US economy, so that you can really know how things are and why Washington should start taking this problem just a bit more seriously. And no, printing money is not the solution. Every time more bills are printed, more inflation and more debt come, and then things like this happen.
The dollar slipped to its lowest level in more than 3 years.
And we already saw here on VisualPolitik how important it is to have a strong currency and a solid currency. But now it's your turn. Do you think Washington's politicians should cut public spending? Leave your answers in the comments below as well as in this survey. And I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please do hit that like button if you did, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for brand new videos every Monday and every Thursday. And also, don't forget to check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. And as always, thank you for watching.
The president's put in place as much public debt, almost as much debt held by the public as all prior presidents combined.
When President Obama was elected, the national debt was $10 trillion. Today, it's over $17 trillion.
This thing's not going to solve itself. This is getting worse every day, and we're running out of time.